As I mentioned to you guys, I told you guys I would come back and we would finish talking about some of what's been going on today, what's been going on this week, the shootings of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile. A lot of people are deeply concerned about what's been happening or what they've been seeing as it pertains to the police brutality issue, and for good reason, right? We're all a little bit upset. We're all angry about what's been going on, or what we've been seeing. I'm not going to say about what's been going on, and the reason I say that is because one of the things I think is really important for us to understand as Black people is that we unfortunately have a reaction to events like this that is exactly that. It's a reaction, and it's a reaction that's driven by what's popular. It's a reaction that's driven by what we can see on a video, things like that. It's not always driven by what's actually occurring in our society. For example, the day before Alton Sterling was killed, Alton Sterling killed in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, by two police officers that pinned him to the ground. The day before Alton Sterling was killed, there was another brother in New York City with the last name Smalls who was shot down by an off-duty cop. He was shot down during a road rage incident. So the cop didn't like the way the brother was driving, and so he shot him down and killed him. He was also 37, just like Alton Sterling. Philando Castile was 33. He also had children, just like Alton Sterling. The only difference between he and Alton Sterling is that Alton had a gun in his pocket. This brother had no weapon whatsoever. Also, uh, Alton was not shot in front of his children. This brother was murdered in front of his kids. And so we have to ask ourselves, why do we react so strongly to Alton Sterling and to Philando Castile's deaths, but did not have the same reaction when this brother was shot and killed in New York? And literally, same type of incident. In fact, the road rage incident is more egregious because there was really no explanation the cop could come up with whatsoever. There's nothing that he could do in terms of actually being able to justify his behavior other than say, I got mad and I lost it. He punched me because the brother did punch him, but he didn't have to murder him. He didn't have to shoot him down. So, that's one of the first thoughts on all of this. That I think it's really important that we really try to figure out how to be more disciplined in terms of how to deal with this. Um, and Jamal's bringing up a good point. Jamal mentioned, is there any video? And that's the thing. There's no video. So what happens is people tend to react to video more than they react to incidents. It's just like when Emmett Till was lynched. There were people who didn't think lynching was a big deal, even though lynching happened far more frequently before Emmett Till was killed than it did after he was killed. So once people saw it, once it affected their psyche, then and they were confronted with it directly. That was when they then said, "Oh my God, this lynching thing is a huge problem." And I think right now, when you talk about police lynchings, when you talk about the police killing Black people, um, you have a similar phenomenon. I hear from a lot of my friends, who I call mainstream Black people, the Black people who got jobs, the ones who are not marginalized. Like, I've been marginalized for a lot of my life. White people don't really work with me that much and never have. And the thing is that I will hear from mainstream Black people who will tell me, they'll call me up and they'll say, "Oh my God, Boyce, are you seeing all this police brutality? This is getting out of hand. This is crazy." And so what I really want to say to them is, wait a minute. I've been talking about, me, and not just me, a lot of people have been talking about this for a while, for a long time, for decades actually. And when I was talking about this back in '06, '07, you weren't really listening. You didn't want to hear it. You didn't care. You didn't think it was a big deal. And now that it's become kind of the thing to talk about, you want to be down. And so I think that unfortunately, if we're not careful, concern about Black men being abused by the police can be a fad. It can become a fad where it's just cool to talk about it for a while, and then when it's not cool, people stop talking about it. Because if you really want, if you really want to dig into this issue, you also got to dig into the overall dimensions of police criminality, abuse by the system. We in America, we are a slave country. We are a country that has slavery. And slavery means, involuntary servitude, right? Or it's a form of involuntary servitude. And if you go to prison, you are a slave in this country, and that's according to the United States Constitution, not just according to Boyce Watkins. And so, as a result of the slavery, what happens is that when you look at the Alton Sterlings and you look at the Philando Castiles, the real abuse typically doesn't start when the arrest takes place. The homicide usually doesn't happen at the traffic stop. The homicide typically occurs and the torture and the abuse occur once you are in complete custody of the police. Once they have you in the county jail and they know that even the other black people ain't giving a damn about you. Other black people don't think Black Lives Matter once you've been arrested or unless you've been shot. Black people, in many cases, we don't feel that Black Lives Matter if it's not on TV. We see it on CNN, then suddenly it's Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. Y'all need to stop doing this to us. Okay, well, why didn't you feel that way the day before Alton Sterling was killed? So when they get you behind that wall and they know that black people don't care anymore, what they're going to do is they're going to torture the hell out of you. They do horrible things. These guys in prison, they get raped by other inmates in many cases. They get raped by prison guards in some cases. They obviously get beaten to death. They get starved. They get frozen out. Down in Georgia, when the brothers in prison decided to stand up and speak up about the way they were being treated, they tortured those brothers something terrible. One of them got killed. They went in there and beat him so bad that he had severe brain damage. He was in the hospital and paralyzed and brain was messed up, everything, because they took him somewhere where the cameras were off, because they know the power of the camera. That's the thing. They know the power of the camera. So they turned the cameras off and they beat this brother to the point where he's now eating his food through a straw. Now he can't even remember his own mother's name. Now he's paralyzed from the waist down. And so what my point here in all of this is that I think it's very important that as we address this, and which we should address these issues with lawsuits. Ken Williams and guys from the Black Lawyers for Justice, and I talked to Kim Cole, another attorney down in Dallas. Lawsuits are going to be filed on many of these cases. Ken Williams' lawsuit, actually, Ken's a former cop who's fighting diligently against the police brutality issue. You might have seen me interview him a few times. Ken is suing departments across the nation for civil rights or for federal law violations because, according to Ken, when you discriminate, you're violating federal law, which means that you now are ineligible to receive federal funds. So he's trying to cut them off financially, which I think is a brilliant idea. So the lawsuits have to be filed. We have to protect our children. We have to teach our sons how to interact with the police, even though sometimes that still doesn't work, but it's better to know than not to know. And so, teaching your sons as far as how to deal with cops and how to avoid trouble with them and stuff like that, that has saved some lives. But then on top of that, politicians, any politician that comes in your church asking for your vote has to be expected to address this issue, and they have to address it in a way that makes sense. Sid is asking, how do you boycott the police? Boycotting the police would be kind of tough. I'm a fan of a more radical idea that I actually heard when I was eating dinner with Minister Louis Farrakhan. One of his sons brought this up, where he said that black people should be allowed to have their own police force in their own community. When you got cops that live right there, you use your tax base to hire cops that live right there in the neighborhood, because what that's going to do is that's going to change the relationships. It changes how cops see good and bad. It changes the fear factor. A lot of these white boys do things to black men because they fear them. They're afraid of us. They just, in many ways, we are extraordinary people. So that's where the fear comes from. Their goal is to pretty much crush the black man's soul and his spirit, or exterminate him physically, psychologically, educationally, economically, before he begins to realize his potential. That's what they're trying to do to your son. So it's very important that you prepare your son to fight against that. And so, where was I going with that? So what he mentioned was that basically, having black people or having cops that are from the neighborhoods that they patrol would force them to have some equity in the outcomes of these interactions with defendants or potential defendants or suspects or whatever. Instead of just going off and slamming Big Mama to the ground, they're going to realize, wait, this is Mrs. Jenkins and she's well respected in the community. If I do this, there are going to be consequences for me. The cop coming in from the suburbs doesn't have any of that respect. They care nothing about Miss Jenkins and how relevant she is to the neighborhood. They care nothing about the fact that an Alton Sterling is a father and that people are dependent on him. They care nothing about the consequences, long and short term, of what happens after they've done whatever they're going to do on their job in order to maintain power. And therefore, they can do what they're going to do, go back out to the suburbs and not feel like there's any consequences. And a part of the reason that they continue to do these things is because in their mind, they believe that there are no consequences. But here's the thing. The police brutality issue is not something that just started. Black men didn't just start getting shot down by the cops. It's actually not as bad as it used to be. In the 80s, when there were no consequences, when there were no cameras around, the abuse was far more rampant. So I think at the end of the day, I want you to really think about this issue from a broader context in terms of saying, how do we fix it? What does it really look like? How do you address the issue in a proactive way as opposed to reactive? How do you address the illness as opposed to the symptoms of the illness? I think that the shootings that we saw really are symptoms of deeper systematic problems. It's not something where it's like, oh, okay, this is the problem, or getting justice for Alton Sterling and his family is the only problem. Don't get me wrong. I want justice for them. I want their kids to get scholarships. I saw that Issa Rae is doing an amazing thing by raising money for that family, which I think is going really well. She raised $100,000, I think, in a day. God bless her for that. But the question is this: if Alton Sterling and Philando Castile's families get justice for what happened to them, what's really been accomplished for the community at large? I mean, what's really been accomplished? You saw this in Ferguson, where people became obsessed with Ferguson. They became obsessed with Ferguson City Council, obsessed with their police force, obsessed with their educational graduation rates, obsessed with all kinds of things happening in Ferguson. Now, the funny thing about it, though, is that Ferguson is a tiny little city right outside St. Louis. On the whole map of all this happening in the Black community, Ferguson isn't even a dot on the map. They're smaller than a dot. So if you achieve full justice in Ferguson, what have you really done? Maybe you've established a blueprint that can be taken to other cities. Okay, absolutely. But at the end of the day, we have to think of it, in the broad sense, as opposed to just kind of saying, I want justice for this person, or I want justice in that city. Because then, to me, it becomes very almost like entertainment. It becomes almost like a celebrity-driven kind of thing. It became the cool thing to go to Ferguson and to say, yeah, I'm in Ferguson, marching and rallying and fighting, standing off with the cops. But what have you really done for your people? I mean, what does that really do? What did the things that happened in Ferguson really do for Black people nationwide? I argue not very much. Now, Sandra Bell, you asked how do we stop it. I laid out some solutions earlier. I'll quickly go on real quick. Lawsuits are important. I think Black attorneys hopefully will have the conscientiousness to give some of their time to helping to fight some of these issues. When you sue people and you take their money, that eventually pushes them back in line. I think that protecting our sons is the top priority, right? Teaching them ways to deal with the police, even though not to say that these brothers did anything wrong, but maybe there are some situations where altercations can maybe be avoided by training your child on things to deal with without necessarily creating an unconditional hatred of cops. I don't think an unconditional hatred of cops is necessarily the answer, because I don't believe that every single cop wants to do the things that these officers did. However, these cops are many of them are complicit in a lot of this, right? They're all part of this broader system that is training these soldiers to go out and exterminate Black men. They're allowing them to see Black men as the enemy, to see Black men as the menace, to see Black men as the threat, to see Black men as the danger. And so because they see Black men in this way, the way you would see, crazed gorillas, it pretty much gives them a license to come and do what they want to do. if they treated white women the way they treat black men, where a white woman was getting shot up every other day, they wouldn't allow that to happen. There's nobody more protected in our society than the white woman, right? So ultimately, if you want to understand the bias, just take the treatment of black men, the way black men are treated at every level of society, from the school system to prison system to on the job to everything else to police brutality, and imagine if white women were treated the same way. That would never be allowed to happen because they would never treat white women that way. Now, what I want to do is see if there are any updates, on the shooting of Philando Castile. Because I want, and really what I'm really interested in is I want to know what President Obama has to say. Now, I want you guys to tell me if you've heard anything from the president, if he said anything. I don't want to say anything that is not true. I see that the president has asked to open a federal investigation into the fatal shooting of Alton Sterling. Obama is deeply disturbed by the police shootings. So I don't know what that means exactly, but I see ABC News is asking, has Obama seen the Alton Sterling shooting video? So that's interesting. Now I'm looking at this, and I can't watch it now because I'm talking to you guys. But there's a video on ABC News where they're asking on ABC, has Obama seen the Alton Sterling shooting video? So I'd be curious to know if you guys could watch it and tell me, what you think. I don't think it's a matter of overly politicizing this, but I think that we have to understand that a political solution is kind of necessary in order for us to deal with this insidious problem. And I think that these are the times where the line is drawn in the sand when it comes to black politicians or white politicians, like a Hillary Clinton. I read Hillary Clinton's statement earlier, and I'm gonna have to say this: I'm not a supporter of Hillary Clinton. I'm not gonna vote for Hillary Clinton. But Hillary Clinton's statement on the shooting of Alton Sterling actually wasn't bad. I didn't feel that she skirted the issue. I think that she made a statement that was as good as anybody could expect. So let me actually find Hillary's statement so I can read it to you, so you can tell me, you guys can tell me what you think without telling me what you think about Hillary. I don't like Hillary. I ain't voting for her, but I have to give credit where it's due. I can't come up here and lie to you and say that she didn't do a good job with something when she actually did. She says, from Staten Island to Baltimore, Ferguson to Baton Rouge, too many African American families mourn the loss of a loved one from a police-involved incident. Something is profoundly wrong when so many Americans have reason to believe our country doesn't consider them as precious as others because of the color of their skin. So, I couldn't ask for much more from that, much more than that. So you can't, you still, while you give her credit for this, you can't disconnect the fact that Hillary's husband incarcerated all those black men with the mandatory minimums and the legislation he pushed through with all this super predator language that they used back then, which was despicable. But the statement, it was better than Obama. It was better than your black president. Your black president's statement hasn't really been anything to write home about. So you got to really, at times like this is when you find out who your friends are, because what this does is this puts the politicians in a precarious situation where it's hard for them to say something in support of one group without offending the other group. And also we live in a society that has a pattern of hating black people. It has an addiction to black disdain. So typically what occurs is that because of this addiction to hating black people, if you just simply do anything in support of the downtrodden, if you do anything that even shows, remote support for, these people being treated as equals, you're going to have people in the establishment who are going to be very unhappy with that. Now let me see here. I'm going to look in here and see if Obama has a quote on what happened today. Let's see here. The White House says President Obama is deeply disturbed. White House spokesman Josh Earnest says Obama is following the situations closely, but he tells reporters aboard Air Force One that the White House can't comment more specifically while the cases are being investigated. So basically, that's kind of a punk move on the part of the Obama administration. It sounds like they are, they're just not really, they're not really taking much of a stand. I don't know, I don't know what the long term play is going to be, but I'm just not particularly happy with what the president had to say on this. Now let's see here. Claudel Douglas says, "What are you prepared to do to make it better? Go to your union, ask them to change y'all's contract. Officers involved in these executions should not receive any compensation." I agree. I agree, Claudel. I think that, um, I think that the police departments and systems around the country are, deeply fraudulent and deeply connected and deeply culpable for everything that's been going on. I mean, you can't look at what's happening with police brutality without, critically analyzing these systems. I think that these systems became more corrupt during the war on drugs, which got them to the point where they labeled the black man really. I mean, they'd already done that before, but what happened was that I think the black man became even more disdained or seen as an enemy combatant, which therefore it was also backed by additional weaponry, different incentives in the system where people were policing for profit, meaning you were now getting compensated for locking up dope boys on the corner the same way you get compensated if you locked up rapists and murderers and actually solved real crime. Also, you had police that were seeing all this drug money. So you had situations like in New Orleans where the cops became drug dealers. They were like, it pays better to escort the drug dealer through the city than it does to actually go lock up drug dealers. It pays better to slang my own dope than it does to than it does to to work as a police officer. It's better for me to go rob a drug dealer and keep his money than it is for me to earn my money the honest way, because I can go rob a drug dealer or I can give a fake warrant. I mean, you have cases where police were using fake warrants to go and harass drug dealers and take all their stuff. So it becomes this very interesting play of just kind of what can we extract from these people, because white people in these juries are stupid enough to believe that we're honest and they're not. When you had statements by guys like Tupac and others, he isn't the first guy to say this, but I remember him saying that the police in many cases are the biggest street gang in the city. And that's what it is. It's like a gang. You got a culture. They all wear blue. They might as well be Crips. And they all go and they all have weapons. They have the power of the state backing them up. It allows them to go through and kick ass and take names and do whatever they want to do. And they get exonerated by the jury. So that's exactly what happened during Black Wall Street. During Black Wall Street, the reason that the whites were allowed to come through that community and murder hundreds of people and incarcerate hundreds more was and then loot and burn the house, loot each house and burn it down one by one. The reason they were able to do that is because they had the power of the state. Other white people gave them resources, weapons, and authority to go in as deputized and commit crime. So really, when you look at the police, you really are dealing with a street gang in some cases, and that's unfortunate because I've seen good cops. I really have, and I'm gonna say it today. I've seen cops that joined the force because they really wanted to help people. I've seen cops do the right thing, but what unfortunately it's gotten to this point where there's a battle now. There's a battle where you can't waffle from one side of the line or the other. If you are a good cop, it's not enough now for you to just say I'm a good cop. You actually have to go out of your way to help prosecute the bad cops. You're going to have to break the blue wall of silence. And I'm going to tell you, that's not an easy thing for a cop to do because your life is in danger. When you go out and you're a cop and you go speak out against other cops, there's a good chance they may do you like they did Christopher Dorner. Anybody remember Christopher Dorner, the brother who was with the LAPD, who spoke out about the racism and everything else, and then they got him to the point where he became a Rambo, basically, where he was running from the cops and killing people, and eventually they went and killed him. Well, the fact is that, for cops, if you're speaking out against other officers, not only are you chastised and probably punished, maybe demoted, and marginalized in the force, there's a good chance you may lose your job and lose your career, lose your reputation, and then also there's a chance that another one of the cops may kill you. That's it. I mean, seriously, cops have killed other cops because they broke the code, right? But unfortunately, that's the war that we're in. That's the situation we're in. Because, what's interesting is that I'm not even sure how in this environment any black man would ever want to be a police officer. Any black man. I mean, I don't care if the police force is hiring and you can't get a job, and I don't care if the police force is offering to pay $200,000-300,000 a year. There are a lot of black men who simply cannot do it and will not do it because they're not. There's a time where being an officer brought pride, from wearing that uniform. I don't think it brings pride anymore. I think it brings shame. It puts you and your family in danger. My father was a cop for 25 years, and I remember when my daddy used to drive me to school in the police car. And I was very proud of that. I was proud of my daddy driving me to school in a police car. I was like, my daddy got some power. He got some authority. And my friends thought that was cool. My friends wouldn't think that was cool now if I was a kid today. I remember when my father had to kill somebody on the job. I remember it wasn't a black guy, it was a white guy. And the white guy pulled out a gun and tried to shoot my dad. And my father shot him. He got a medal for it. And I was glad he shot the guy because that guy almost killed my father. So I know what it's like to have somebody that you love go to work every day and hope that they come back safe, right? And that leads me to empathize with those families of officers that don't get involved in all this kind of nonsense. But I do think that the situation's, has called for these officers to be courageous enough to realize your job description has now extended. Your job description, these officers have to realize that now your job description is no longer to serve and protect the public. In one way, your job description includes serving and protecting the public in another way. Instead of protecting good people from bad people, you must realize that the group of bad people also includes some of the people you work with. But historically it wasn't seen that way, right? It was sort of like, I'm a cop, we're all good, we protect the good from the bad, and it's very, very simple. But now you've got bad people that have infiltrated your system because your system's corrupt. In fact, it makes I think about Mexico. In Mexico, the problem's more in cities. The bad people have actually overrun the good in the police force. You have, one of the most corrupt justice systems in the world in Mexico. You literally have people that work for the drug cartels who are also police officers, and the good people in that system. I don't even know if they can ever win. I don't know what the solution will be in Mexico because I don't feel that there's real justice in Mexico at all. But I think we have a shot. I really do. I think that if we do it right and we put enough pressure, I think that we can create better police departments. But I think it's going to require us to kind of wash away the systematic norms that were developed during the era of mass incarceration. Mass incarceration and the war on drugs is really the fourth Holocaust that was invoked on the black community. The first was the Middle Passage, one of the worst experiences in all of human history. Then there was 250 years of slavery. So it's even unfair to call that one Holocaust because literally in the amount of time that they killed the Jews in Germany, 6 years, you could literally fit about 40 Jewish Holocausts within one black Holocaust. You could fit 40 of the Nazi regimes in the one American Nazi regime of slavery, right? And then you throw in the third Holocaust, which was 100 years of Jim Crow, right? And again, 100 years. That's 100 years. 100 divided by 6. What's that about? 15 or something like that? 16, right? So, and then after that, the fourth Holocaust was mass incarceration, where basically more black families, were broken apart. People died. We lost trillions in wealth during mass incarceration. The question of reparations should not even be a question. Stop asking it as a question. It should be a statement. If I steal your shit and I've taken your shit for many, many years, there's no question about whether or not I robbed you. There's no question about whether or not I owe you. No question at all. The only thing left to do at that point is for you to make a statement that, look, I'm not going to feel peace with you or justice with you or feel comfortable with you until you pay me back. That's what it needs to be. So stop thinking of reparations as a question. It's not a question. It should be a statement. Period. That's it. By the way, if you guys want a free e-copy of my book, It Takes a Village to Raise the Bar, go to drboycewatkins.net. That's drboycewatkins.net. You get a free e-copy of my book. Just sign up and it's totally free. I think you're going to like it because it expresses more of these ideas in terms of community building. I'm very big on solving problems from the core, from the root up, as opposed to just solving the symptoms of the problem. And I think that when you approach things in that way, in a holistic framework, you get the ability to do what we really need to do, which is really nation building. Because so many of these systems are so screwed up, so corrupt, that I don't even know how we can really coexist with white people anymore. I mean, it's really getting to the point where the line in the sand is huge now. It's hard to go to work every day with your white friends and your white coworkers and have them say something like, well, maybe Alton Sterling did something to deserve to die. Maybe back 20 years ago, you would have felt frightened and intimidated enough or misinformed enough that you would sit back and let them say those things about you, and you wouldn't say anything. But now black people are waking up. Black people ain't scared. The black middle class is on board. That's the game changer. You got mainstream black people, people sitting next to the king, people sitting, in these corporations in VP and presidential positions who are pissed off. And they're just waiting for somebody at work, some white person at work, to say something stupid. So I really think that the nation, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, somebody said in a study, they said the country has not been this divided since the Civil War, and that was 4 or 5 years ago. I think the country has become more divided since that time, and I don't think it's going to get any better. So I think that you have to understand that there's a point where things might really go down, where there might really be violence, there might really be a civil war in this country. It's happened before, it can happen again. Hundreds of thousands of Americans died during the first Civil War. And I would say that for black folks who really believe in this issue, I think you got to ask yourself, what are you willing to die for? What are you willing to die for? I ask myself that question all the time. I think about it, and I know for a fact that if my death, let's say, God forbid, I was in the position of an Alton Sterling and somebody videotaped Dr. Boyce Watkins being apprehended by the cops, and I was to get shot in that altercation. If I knew that me being shot and murdered on video would be enough to wake Negroes up, I would take that bullet in a second and be glad to take it. There are so many people who die all the time for nothing. I wouldn't mind dying for something, And so I think that for yourself, you got to ask yourself, is there anything that you're willing to die for? And that, because the thing is that most of the time when people historically have really pursued freedom, freedom is something that you can't really ask for it. A powerful person, especially a savage, like the white man system, is a savage system built by savage people. Savages don't respect decency. Savages don't respond to you sort of asking them politely or with integrity. Savages kind of respond to force. They respond to you got to make the savage respect you. It's like a dog. You got to smack the dog a couple times and really let him know who's the boss. And once you establish domination, then the dog starts to submit. Well, the white man and his behavior, it ain't that much different from a dog. When he thinks he can bully you, he's gonna bully you forever. If he thinks all you're gonna do is march and pray and hope that Jesus comes and fixes it, and you're forgiving everybody for doing horrible things to you, then he's never gonna respect that. So I would definitely say that as far as like how we move forward, and I'm gonna move forward. I'll keep you guys posted. I'm having conversations with people about the next steps and talking to lawyers and things like that, because I want things to go to court. I want lawsuits filed, etc. I don't want violence unless violence has to occur. I don't think that people who want violence, who are quick to want violence, understand what happens with war. War and violence are like a can of worms. Once you open it up, you can't put the worms back in the can. And people that live in countries that are torn by violence, all they pray for is peace. All they pray for is peace. So I want there to be peace. But at the same time, I think that you have to be prepared for whatever comes. So just be ready for whatever comes. This is not it. This is not the end of anything. There'll be another incident just like this week that you're going to see on social media, and then there'll be a couple more next week. And each time people are going to get more and more angry, and the divide's going to grow and grow and grow. And the question is, how are these leaders, black leaders, politicians, etc., going to respond? I don't know. It'll be interesting. But anyway, I'm about to get out of here. By the way, once again, if you want a copy of the book, a free e-copy of the book, go to drboycewatkins.net. Just sign up, go to drboycewatkins.net, and you can get a free e-copy of my book. It Takes a Village to Raise the Bar, A New Paradigm for Black America. That book, I wrote that book when I did a forum with Minister Louis Farrakhan back in 2013, we had a 2.5 hour forum where we talked about those 4 concepts. I asked the minister to join me, and we hit those 4 ideas. And there's a video out here somewhere of it, so you can probably find the DVD somewhere. But you don't have to worry about going to get the DVD. Just take the book for free. I want everybody to read it. Just do me a favor and share it. Also share this feed if you feel that this conversation is helpful to anybody. Please share it on your Facebook page and let people know about it as well. So take care, guys. I'm about to go and go handle some business. So it's great talking to you, and I will talk to you soon. Take care. Love you. Peace.